What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Arctix, and boy, do I have some Midnight Society update news for you. On August 12th, Midnight Society hosted an AMA in their community Discord, this time for the first time open to the public, where members of the community, both inside and outside of the Founders Program, were able to ask the developers questions directly. The AMA itself was moderated by Rebecca Miller, who's head of Variant Intelligence, aka social media, and Rob Bowling, who's the studio head, Fourzerotwo, and Quinn Del Hoyo, the creative director, aka Deez. It actually went off without a hitch. The AMA itself was full of a lot of questions from the community. The studio covered basically everything that happened at both in-person events, both New York City and LA, and everything that people have been asking since the studio themselves revealed both the name of the game that they're working on, which is called DEADROP, and they dropped the first ever Snapshot, which is an early build of the game for the Founders community itself to play and test and experience. So sit back, relax, enjoy the AMA. The AMA itself I have is fully unedited. It's exactly what happened as it happened. I did, however, edit a bunch of visuals to provide some visual aids for what they're talking about, more or less, so you can see what's going on, some terms. And I also made sure to post the questions so that while you're watching this and listening to it, you can see the question that's currently being asked, so you have a little bit of a frame of reference when you're watching the AMA itself. After the AMA is over, we'll get back together on here and we'll talk about what you guys thought, some of the things that they touched on throughout the AMA, and I'll give my opinion on pretty much everything that they went over. I'll be making another catch-up video just like the last catch-up video that's on the channel, and as soon as I'm done with it, I'll make sure to post it in the Discord and on Twitter, so make sure you're following me on Twitter at ArctixTV, and the next catch-up video will have pretty much everything that happened from April 1st all the way till now, including the DEADROP name, including the name reveal, what happened in LA, the entire trip in LA, the people I met, some pictures we took in LA, and it'll talk about the snapshot itself, some stuff I did with Jake Lucky. So it's going to be a packed video, so be on the lookout for that. But for now, without further ado, enjoy the AMA. I spent a lot of time editing it. I did some fun stuff in there as well. Really proud of it. It took like 30 hours to render, so I hope you enjoy. So sit back, relax, and we'll talk right after the AMA is finished. Rob, is that you?
Hello.
Hey, everyone.
All right.
Get it kicked off.
Yeah, we've had a lot of good questions so far. Thanks everyone for submitting. Let's start off with, I think we're gonna hit one of the questions that's been top of mind for pretty much everyone. You know, Doc's been talking about vertical extraction shooters for a while. I think most people understand, you know, conceptually what it means when we say verticality, but can you guys just start off talking about vertical extraction shooters and the type of movement we're going to see in DEADROP?
Sure. Yeah, we could talk about that. I think me and Rob can get that covered a little bit. Yeah, so for us, the obvious thing when it comes to verticality is the tower that you're going to be playing in. It's going to be stretched very vertically instead of horizontally. And so that means our level design is going to take into account how much a player is going to be utilizing the Z-axis, looking up and down, and also fighting up and down and moving up and down, all of those kind of things. So for us, we're going for a game, and this is the beauty of it. I mean, things can change as we're going through this and working with our variants on this. But yeah, we're looking at ways that the player can move. How can they mantle up certain things, climb up different things, not just certain heights of things, but also other kind of metrics and things and ideas that we could put in our level design. Do we like vertical zip lines? Do we like ladders? What are the kind of things that we want to experiment with and try? And we're listening to everyone on that. But that's when we think about vertical movement, we're not just thinking strictly I walk and run and crouch. There's ways that we want the player to be able to pull themselves up to ledges, have an idea, how do I flank that person, get into a good position to take them out. And so that's, when we think of that, it's more in that realm and less about things like, I don't know, jetpacks or stuff like that. It's in-world level design movement stuff that you could do as a person today, but augmented a little bit more from a video game standpoint. So that's kind of in regards to the vertical movement. I don't know if you got anything you want to add, Rob.
I always do. And here's what I've loved about it, right? Is I feel like we've landed on VES, vertical extraction shooter, out of necessity of there being elements of genres we love, ways we like to build levels that just weren't being met currently by the current games, right? Because, you know, a lot of us come from backgrounds of arena shooters where we build arena style maps that have very specific sight lines, right? If you look at like old Call of Duty stuff where you have the 3 lanes and you can sort of strategize around that, you have very set cover points and sight lines, and you can master those areas, right? Halo took a different approach, you know, in arena shooters, but like there's a flow to it that you can sort of master and understand that we really like about it, right? That and then when Battle Royale came around, there's a lot of things we love about Battle Royale, right? Mostly the scale of it, both in the environment but also the player counts that add a really interesting element, right? The fact that it wasn't just teams of 4v4 or 6v6 and you can go to those big battle sort of things and get those big sort of free-for-all, last man standing, king of the hill moments of like, oh, 100 players going into a match, right? That was exciting, but really betrayed a lot of the things that were core to how you design arena shooters, right? When you go to that scale. So then you find these battle royale maps that are like huge, but have these points of interest that kind of try to capture that arena shooter moment to moment stuff sometimes, but like misses the marks in some ways. And so like all of those things individually are cool in their own way, right? And I think what we were trying to do and what we're trying to accomplish here with this VES is like, how do we take that scale and scope of those battle royales, right? But capture more of like mastering a level and the flow of level. And like, so I think by sort of going vertical and having these sectors, we get to play around with those philosophies a lot, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, you bring up another interesting point too when you talk about mastering things. I mean, so
yeah,
in terms of player movement speed, right? We do have a question here, which I think is great, about plans to vary the movement speeds. And this person also acknowledges that like slower speeds leads like that obviously needs to be front of mind if we're talking about tactical decisions, right? So is that something you guys are already thinking about?
Of movement speed in general, just like trying out different speeds. I mean, I guess that's what the question is kind of getting to. I mean, I posed it back to you, Becca, like you're the one asking it, so I apologize for that. But I mean,
no,
yeah,
that's how I interpreted it as well. So,
yeah. So I mean, for us, movement speed is definitely crucial because I mean, it informs level design and scale and metrics and everything. That being said, we are open to trying new things, and the speed that we have in the Snapshot 1 was very deliberate. We're trying to make a game where the pacing is that deliberate, like tactical kind of shooter. We want kill times to be low, and we want to be able to punish someone if they make a mistake, and you as a player, you need to make interesting decisions as you move around. And so if you aren't being able to just zoom around all the time, that definitely changes how you think. So for us, we are definitely interested in looking at more and how to tweak that a little bit because we don't know if we've found the secret sauce yet. So that's for us is it's definitely important to keep an open mind with this stuff. But to be clear, we are looking more on the tactical side of movement in regards to speed in our game for sure.
Yeah, and like a lot of the feedback that we heard and saw, which was expected from Variance from the first snapshot, is like, man, we move slow. Like this is a slow movement speed, right? Compared to everything else on the market, and especially for shooters. And as Quinn said, very deliberate, right? Because we think of this as the starting point. Now we are looking at ways, and we've been discussing of like, how do you augment your movement speed, right? And there's been a lot of discussions of like, maybe you do that when you customize your weapon, right? Like maybe it's like, oh, hey, I'm going to take off this stock and put on this stock, and that gives me 0.2 in this speed, right? Or maybe I replace this grip with this grip. And so, and maybe that carries over to the gear and the stuff that you wear, right? The loot that you're finding. And so a lot of the early discussions that we've had And you'll hear that a lot, right? As not in just this AMA, but in our discussions with Variance and everywhere, is in the discussions we've had, right? Because do not take this as like, this is how it is, it's set in stone. Nothing we say is that, right? Game development, and especially this game, is an iterative process. So when we say, oh, we've had discussions about this, that normally means this is what we're going to try first in the snapshot. And then our job collectively is to play it and be like, ooh, yeah, that doesn't really work. Or, oh, like this feels unbalanced. Or like, oh, maybe we move that over to gear instead of being a weapon attachment thing, right? Those are the things that are going to fuel those future conversations. But just to get to the heart of the question, the ideal is by default, right? I'm a combatant in the refiner state. I have no weapon. My movement's going to be slow and tactical. Right? And what we need to look at is like, all right, how can we give the player the ability to augment that based on their playstyle? Because there's going to be people in the audience right now who want to stay slow and tactical, right? They're not running gunners. They're like, hey, I'm going to stay slow. I'm going to focus on making sure that I can be the tank of my group. I'm moving through slowly. I'm making methodical decisions. I'm checking my corners. I got my head on a swivel, right? And then there's going to be people who are like, no, I'm Leroy Jenkins it. I'm running in. I'm going fast. I want to move quickly. I want to do whatever quick movements I can do. If there's tactical slide, I'm sliding into that door, right? Like they're not checking the corners, not doing any of that stuff. There's going to be that diversity of playstyle. And I think what we want to do is support those to a degree, right? I don't think, to Quinn's point, I don't think we're ever going to get to the point where people are flying around on jetpacks or like, marathon running around, being crazy. So I think we are definitely, there is a cap to that diversity of playstyles, and I think we definitely fall if the spectrum is like crazy super fast gameplay Twitch shooter and slow methodical, right? I think we definitely fall on this side of the spectrum and are going to stay on that side of the spectrum, but there will be degrees of variability based on the customization of your class or loadout or however we decide to implement that specific customization.
Cool. Right on. Speaking of customization, this player also wants to know if you've scheduled your DEADROP tattoo appointment yet.
I have. So here's the thing. I wanted to do it this week. So let's give some context to people who are not part of the Variant community. We all met in LA. We revealed the DEADROP logo. Some of us lost our fucking minds over it, right? We love it. I've already seen Variants getting tattoos. I committed to getting one if they got one. They did it. They followed through. So mine's going right here. Mine's connecting this part. So it's going to be coming out of here, going on the hand. I was going to schedule it for this week, but unfortunately, I have to go on vacation soon and take the kids swimming, which is a big no-no with tattoos. I'm not going to jump in the ocean with a fresh skull on my hands. So I'm going to be doing it as soon as I get back.
Very important.
So soon.
Yeah. All right. So DEADROP tattoo coming soon. Wonderful. Okay, so let's move on to Crimson Relic is wondering, will DEADROP have proximity chat? And they are far from the only person wondering this, but yeah. Thoughts?
Man, that's a good question. So internally, we have discussed proximity chat, and that is something that we do want to explore. To be clear, though, and even like what Rob is saying, nothing is set in stone. We're going to keep communicating, play testing, sending out snapshots, and when we get it in, we'll share with the community, and we'll check it out. But that is definitely something that we want to do and try out because we like that emergent style that can come from playing a game. And even internally, as we've started doing some play tests, we've had some uneasy alliances in our game if you have proximity chat. And we're kind of faking a little bit through Discord and everything like that. But if you have a game where you have that, then the whole world opens up to how do you interact with other players, right? Yeah, there are going to be people that talk trash. Yes. Are there going to be people that don't do that? Yes. There's going to be a whole spectrum in between. But for the style of game we're making, we love that idea of a way for players to have that social aspect, that interactivity, connectedness to other players in the world in a way that's not just, shoot anything that moves. Have those interesting conversations. Hey, you good? You friendly? We good? You're going to do anything? And then the other player on the other line, she's like, no, we're not good. And then she shoots you, right? So those are the kind of things that we definitely want to explore, and that's what proximity chat can give us. So we are looking into it.
That I'm gonna shoot you.
Hey, you could, and that would be great. We could at least have a conversation about it first in game.
Man,
All right,
yeah,
Quinn.
I love proximity chat, and I'm excited to experiment with it. I'm excited to see how what our community does with it if we try it out in there. But there's just like you touched on, Quinn, there's so many good social moments, emergent social moments that happen because of proximity chat. Like I can think back, not just recently, right, in games, but like a lot of older games that introduced it. Like there's so many good moments I had of like deception and like, communication, friendly communication as well. But like when you get into the deception territory, that's when I feel like proximity chat just sings.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, well, Crimson Relic also wants to know how soon can we expect to get to PvP snapshots this year?
Oh, baby.
Yeah, this year, question mark.
Crimson Relic is. Why are they asking all the questions?
They're just on fire.
They got the good ones.
Okay, that's good.
I mean, it was upvoted. There's 12 upvotes. I'm trying to prioritize, man.
No, that's good. That's good. I mean, if you have a variant guide, and we could talk, I don't want to go too off rails on what the variant guide is, but that is something that we're building every snapshot with art and work in progress stuff of the game. And the back cover of the variant guide is always a tease of what we're trying to do in the future for future snapshots. So if you look at that back cover, there's 2 variants with very different color VisorCortexes, and that tells you like, hey, that's us trying to get to and hint and tease that multiplayer is coming soon, and that's what we are play testing internally now, and we want to get it out as soon as possible. We try not to make promises here, but we just want to be very transparent on where we're headed, and Snapshot 2 is one that we are working really diligently to try to get some sort of multiplayer element so we can test out the weapons, test out how does it feel to shoot at someone else or to be shot at, how does it feel, like we got to start testing scale of the environments and all those kind of things that are not just you in a shooting range. So for us, these things are just crucial to try to nail down, and we need other players in a server in order to help make that possible.
Yeah,
yes.
Cool.
That was a perfect answer, Quinn. God, I love that.
Oof. Smoked
Got me
it.
hyped.
All right. Fiverr Unit Alpha wants to know how many active players are going to be in a game session.
Rob, I'm always going first, man. I say you take this one.
Yeah. The answer is the literal answer is we don't know yet, right? If you ask me today, I would say 100. I want 100 people in that tower as soon as we go, right? How we're building this game in reality, though, is we're going to do whatever like we can get in that feels good, right? And we're going to play test it, we're going to iterate it, and we'll probably grow from there or shrink from there, right? If we can get 100 players matchmaking into the tower and test it out and see if that's garbage, right? See if it's just too much chaos, then sure, let's do it, right? So for me, like when we've talked about it internally and we're like, oh, hey, like now that we're like moving into multiplayer territory and we're, working on optimizing the dedicated servers and the matchmaking and all of that, how many people are we dropping in the match? My answer is always 100, right? But what I don't want to do is I don't want to give any false expectations that it will stay 100 because it may not, right? Because I am open-minded enough to know that we might drop into that tower with 100 players and it is like, shipment with 100 players. Right, and it's like this is chaos, the wrong kind of fun, right, for what we're trying to do in this tower. But we'll figure that out. But I think that's where I would like to start. If we start there, or if we have to build to there to test that out based on technical reasons or optimization reasons, we'll figure that out together over the coming snapshots.
Keeping it 100.
Yeah.
Lock it now. Lock it in. We don't ship unless it's 100.
At MidnightSociety, we're always 100.
Quinn, that's some voice actor quality.
Hey.
Wow. Cool. All right. Well, yeah, while we're still talking about snapshots too, another question from the community, which I think is interesting, is what are your plans, or I'm going to edit this to say, do you have plans for for incentivizing and rewarding variants who extensively playtest the snapshots?
Ooh.
Yeah. Yeah. So the short answer is yes, we do. And so right now, so we've introduced early on, we introduced the concept of series patches, right? So most of the people in the community have the Series 0 patch, which was the Claw NFT. That represented everybody in the community. And what we're looking at is how can we extend that concept to reward special milestones in the community. Some of those are, you know, sort of universal, right? It's like, oh, everybody who got this first snapshot should probably have a badge or a patch that represents that, right? But some of them we want to be sort of activity based. So that's what we're exploring now. Like even in the next snapshot, we're looking at ways of like, hey, can we tie in things that you can do in the world, whether it's like exploring around or activities, you know, it doesn't always need to be tied to code, that we can track, that we can award things to, right? So I can tell you right now, our thinking is about doing custom patches for everybody who does things. But if the variants have ideals of what they think would be cool, right? I think right now, while we're focused on gameplay mechanics and stuff, those digital collectibles make sense, right? I think once we get further along in the game's life cycle and we start introducing things like skins and cosmetics and customization in game, then we can start looking at like, does it make sense to reward that kind of stuff? But I think we're a ways off from that right now. Right now we're in the phase of game mechanics, right? We're not really thinking about cosmetics and monetization and all that stuff. But I think once we get down the road, there is some cool opportunity there. So I would say as a community, let's be thinking about this. But we are actively building in systems now to sort of reward things based on participation, milestones. Some of those will be skill-based. Some of those will not be skill-based, right? Like some of them might be like, oh, hey, we've hidden X amount of things around to encourage people and incentivize people to explore the build, right? Especially as this build gets bigger and bigger, right? Like once this tower starts growing, I'm gonna regret doing this motion once this hits YouTube. But once this starts growing, there's gonna be a lot of space to explore. Oh, I've got off the rails on that one.
That's okay.
Next question, Becca.
So on the topic of, community involvement, it's obviously a huge pillar for us. It's why we're doing what we're doing. We want more collaboration. We want to include people more. So we talked about guild leadership. I think we touched on this maybe in LA as well. Are these going to be community members that are selected by an application process whereby we review them, as a team? Or are these actually going to be people that the community selects or votes on, for example?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And so the guilds and like the eyes, right? Like the eyes are like all the guild stuff. That is a separate membership thing. That is even more exclusive than Variance, because how I like to talk about it is where Variance, like claws are everybody who plays the game, right? That's everybody in our community is a claw. Whether you participate in our community or in the Discord or active or not, if you've downloaded the game at any point and played it, you are a claw, right? That's our mass society. Then variants are a subclass of that, right? They're an exclusive echelon of claws, right? So you could be a claw and a variant at the same time, but not everybody is a variant. And those are people who want to be actively involved in the development of the game, the balancing of the game, the design of the game, the early play testing. Like that's a lot of like our core community, right? Who want to be very vocal, have their voices heard, and be involved in that development process from a gameplay standpoint, right? The eyes, where these guilds fall into, right? And that the Embers interact with, those are people who want to be involved in like not necessarily gameplay, right? But they want to be involved in like the content creation around the game. And when I say content creation, I don't mean just making, streams and videos and all that, which is super valuable. I'm talking about like in-game content creation, right? So those are people who are modders or map makers or artists who want to make weapon skins or character skins or all that stuff, right? We have big ambitions for how UGC plays into the future and how all that stuff, map making and creative and all that plays into the future of DEADROP, right? Now, there's a lot of unanswered questions on how that works and how we make sure everybody's properly credited and incentivized and all of that, which we're going to figure out together. But that subset of creators, the people who are going to be making that stuff and wanting to publish it and distribute it to the active community within DEADROP, that is the eyes and guilds, right? And so there is a separate membership for that, and therefore there will be a separate application for that. But just like we did the variance stuff, right? An application, the goal of an application, I'm sorry, I'm getting super in the weeds on this, but I want to make sure I answer the question as fully as possible. That is so that we have an understanding of who somebody is. And the reason we do that is to maintain the health of the community. Because just like with variance, what we don't want is we don't want people who are just drive-buying through the community. We want people who want to be here for a long time, be active, and have the best interests of everybody else in the community in their hearts and minds, right? And so, like, I don't want you part of the community if you're just trying to flip something or speculate on something, or like just like you're here for some reason that isn't the long-term health of this community and this game, right? And the same thing applies even more to the guilds, because they are going to be involved in like stuff that all of us are going to experience, right? And so that application process to make us sure that we are weeding out any malintent. But then also, just like we chose variance, there's a whole weighting and scoring system to prioritize people, right? So for example, if somebody has been a variant for a long time and applies to join the eyes, right? They're obviously instantly more desirable than somebody who's fresh into the community, somebody who's never been a part of it and like whatever, right? So they are going to be more prioritized and scored higher in that application process just by default, right? The same thing applied to when we did the application process for variance, is like people who went through the ARG and were part of the Deez Zero community were obviously far more likely to be a variant than somebody who just came in on the last day and tried to get an access pass. So the philosophy is very similar.
Yeah, that makes sense. I do anticipate, some people who had applied to be a founder but maybe didn't get accepted. I wonder if there's a way to remember like who those people are, right? And like see if those people also apply in the future.
Yeah.
So
we don't have to remember. It's all in the code. It's all in the database.
They're there.
Awesome.
We know.
Yeah. Sweet. And then in terms of, I like that you brought up, it's like we want to know who our founders are. We want to know who our variants are and have good ways to identify them and the roles that they want to play in DEADROP, in Midnight Society, in the community. Helmet Fire has a question. Can variants have their unique helmets as a unique, legendary, highest tier skin or something like that in the actual game? They'd love to have something that shows off who they are in game.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah, we've been thinking about that. We talked about this a little bit at the Los Angeles Founders event as well, because that question came up. A similar question came up, and I, as a game designer, but also just as a player, like a video game player, I've always loved things that can show off, that players can show off cosmetically, right? Exclusive stuff, things that are hard to get, so that you could peacock, right? We call it peacocking. You could show something off, and that is something that we love. And our variants are very important to us. They're the most important fans we have in the world right now. And so for us, we would love to find ways that when you see a variant in DEADROP, you're like, whoa, what is that? I've never seen that before, because it's a very tight and exclusive group. I mean, the majority of players, they're claws, like Rob talked about. They're not going to have the VisorCortex. And so for us, we really want to get and find a way to have your VisorCortex represented in game. Like, that is a big desire that I have on the creative direction side, is how do we have that represented in game for the people that have been there from day zero, our day zero community. And that's to us is super important to try to find and get that in there.
Yeah. because that is going to be cool. Like right now, you look around our Discord and you see a lot of variants, right? Obviously, because we're in an echo chamber right now. But when we launch right to the public, and there are 30 million active users in the game, right? And you think of like how few variants there will be, right? Like that's going to be exciting because it will have that moment that Quinn's talking about where you stop in your tracks when you see a variant compared to everybody else in the game, you know?
Yeah, and then if we have proximity chat, right? It's like someone's like, "Whoa, what is that?" And then they come up to you, and you've been in games where this happens before. Someone comes up to you and they're looking at you, you know, and they're like checking you out. You're like, "Yeah, man, what's up?" You know.
So no, you guys can't see this, but Quinn just looked up and down in his camera.
Oh yeah.
They'll see it on YouTube. Check it on the YouTube.
It'll be there. Yeah.
Sweet. Cool. So let's pivot to the tower. We just put out a blog today going over, terms of existence and words that people should know as they relate to DEADROP, as they relate to MidnightSociety, what even is the existence, right? So yeah, do you guys want to just briefly talk about maybe the vision of the existence?
Yeah, sure. Rob, you want to cover that? Because, I mean, there's lots of terms in here. I think we can go over a lot of stuff. But, I mean, the existence, I think that is something that we talked about and came up with. But I think a lot of it, I mean, Rob, you were there from, like, the very beginning on those thoughts, the terminology and everything. And I think it would be really cool for the people here to hear of what your thoughts are going into that.
Yeah, so for me, the existence and how we describe it in the variant guide is that it is the totality of everything in MidnightSociety, right? The existence is where MidnightSociety exists, it's where Doc exists, it's where our variants exist, it's where all claws live. Everything that you experience here is the existence, right? So think of that as like our universe. Because just like with the variants and everything, we like to keep as much stuff in universe as possible, right? And then so when you look at like, all right, well, what is the existence? Like, what is inside of that, right? It's all the people, and that those people are broken down into just normal citizens of the city that surrounds the refiner states. It's the claws, which are the combatants that go and fight in these refiner states. It's the refiner state itself, which is that massive structure, right, that we call the tower sometimes for short. And so, like, all of this exists inside of one universe, you know? And, like, we are not a deep story game, right? Like, you're not going to drop into Dead Zone and watch a 10-minute cutscene about anything. Most likely, right? But we do think that lore and narrative drive a lot of things. But we like to explain that in game through environmental storytelling and through, the cosmetics and looks of characters and the things you find and the things you can customize. And so I like to think of our game as like a deep lore, but not narrative driven experience, right? And so a lot of these sort of like touch on that stuff. Because I think what's really compelling is once we all get in there as variants and members of this existence and start expanding it through the stories that we create together, right? The stories that come out through gameplay and emergent gameplay and the community and the fact that, like, look at Spacebob, man. Spacebob exists purely because he was created from this community. And how that expands and grows in the world is going to be just exciting to watch.
Yeah, I mean...
You go ahead.
There is a question actually about Spacebob. Is Spacebob made out of space dust?
Oh man, he's trying.
Made out of something.
Yeah, the amount of space dust that dude consumes. He's got some kind of agenda.
Something going on there. Okay. All right. Well, as it relates to the tower, the existence, refiner states, all that stuff. Is there going to be different types of biomes?
Oh, that's a great question.
Yeah, I mean,
I'll let you take this, Quinn.
Okay.
Talking about the sectors.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, for us, biomes and things like that, like we call them sectors because, again, as Rob said, like everything we try to keep in universe, we try to build a deep lore, and even that's why, even at Midnight Society, we consider ourselves part of the existence. We've got our own.
Whoa.
I think we lost Quinn. I'll take it over. I'll try to leave exactly where he left off. We have our own VisorCortexes. We are Variance in this side of the existence alongside everybody else, right? And people who were here on December 14th when we announced, you saw that, we had our own characters that were not Variants before we announced Variants, and then we all switched over to our Variant design. That sort of continues into the tower, right? Because these refiner states are built out of sectors, right? So these are again, man. Every time I talk about this tower, the refiner states are like hundreds of floors, right? And those floors, collections of floors, are made out of sectors. Now, each of these sectors, if you went through the ARG, if you're an early member of the community, you sort of got a taste of this. But each of these sectors are sort of themed, right? So biomes is a nice way to think about it because some of them are extreme, right? We have exterior ones that are, on the outside of the tower but connected to the tower. So you go out there and you have terrain and hills and lakes and trees and long sight lines. And then a lot of the sectors are inside the tower. And like each of these, even the ones inside, could be like, some are spacious and have very long sight lines, right? And are open areas, but they're still themed around a specific type of environment, right? Maybe it's cold storage, or maybe it's the shopping centers within the refiner states, or maybe it's the industrial area of the refiner states where they're actually refining this dust, right? And exporting it out. It's the shipping department. So each of these will have themes and styles, which translate not just to the visuals of the sector, but it also impacts the gameplay of the sector, right? Some of those are tighter spaces, more CQB. Some of those are sniper alleys with really long sight lines and limited cover. Some of those have environmental hazards, right? Think about cold storage. If that sort of temperature regulator goes down, maybe everybody in that sector is at risk. Another component of these sectors that ties into their theme or their biome is the fact that they will shut down during the course of a session, right? So this entire refiner state is not active for the entire session. So over time, sectors will shut down. And what this does is it forces players to move around the tower. Because I think a common misconception about the verticality of this game is that it's a fight to the top. But it is not, right? Players are moving up and down and around and across this tower throughout the entire section. And now what happens is, like, as these sectors shut down, players are forced to move, right? And they're pushed closer together, and it sort of controls the flow of a match in certain ways. And so if you're going to extract out of this tower and you want to extract, you have the ability or the gear required or whatever you need to do to extract out of a specific sector, you want to make sure you do that before that sector shuts down. Otherwise, you either have to find another extraction point or you're stuck surviving the tower, right? If you want to fight it out. And how those, this is the last point, how those sectors shut down is deeply tied to their theme, right? So for example, the cold storage, maybe that temperature regulator goes out and people freeze to death if they don't get in the tower. Maybe, the other area floods, the other area, releases some sort of AI component that hunts down players. There's a lot of things that we can play with as a community. We're designing these sectors. Now, how we're going to introduce these to the players is we're probably going to be introducing sectors or a few sectors at a time in snapshots, right? Probably in the white box phase, so that we can focus on player flow and cover points and the really tangible stuff that matters to gameplay, right? And then once we sort of nail that down and we're all happy with it, then we start doing art passes. But that whole time that we're playtesting it together, right? All the variants are playtesting it and getting the feel for the balance of the gameplay. That's our time to talk about the visuals of it. Like, oh, this feels really cool, like if it would be this or if we had this, right? And then that feeds into all the conversations the artists are having, and then over time we start layering on the visual passes to these sectors, and then by the time we're done, that tower is made up of a diverse, collection of environments, both in theme and visuals and threats. That was a long answer.
Yeah, no, but that's good. It's really in depth because we with the blog today, we just put out this concept art piece too of the tower, and people have seen little I can't say snapshot. We'll say little screenshots or like snippets of the tower here and there, and I think it is really important to touch on. So yeah, thanks for going in depth on that. I also learned some things today. Okay, so you touched on gameplay. While we're on that topic, Fatality has an interesting question here too. They love gameplay, but at the end of the day, they're looking for quests, tasks, missions, something, right? Some sort of objective to add to the gameplay whereby you can unlock cosmetics or in-game items. Do we have any plans to do that?
Yes, we do. So there are NPCs in this world, in this tower, outside of the tower, right? So there is a concept that we want to do that is like, we understand that, and what we like about the extraction shooter side of this genre of VES and the subgenre in general is that not every player is going into that tower to be the highest kill rate, right? That is one of the appeals to me, is like, some players are going in there to dominate, right? Some players are going in there, they're going to get a lot of kills, they're going to get a lot of loot, and they're leaving like fat cats, right? They're heading out and they've got all this really good stuff, and that's what they are there for. Other players are going in, they're taking it slow. They want to get maybe one good kill, get some good stuff, extract out, sort through that stuff, sell the stuff they don't want, modify their weapons with the stuff they do want, and then head back into the tower, right? Other people are like, yo, it's 3 a.m. I don't have that high speed, low drag mentality right now. My reaction speed's down. Or maybe just in general, they're not that high slaying player count person, right? They want to drop in the tower and they want to do quests. They want to take a contract before they go into the tower that's like, hey, find this, do this, unlock this door, activate this, right? Cause the shutdown of Sector 5, right? Like, there's all these things that we can do there, and we look at those as contracts that you get from NPCs outside the tower, because narratively, you got to think, claws are heading into the refiner state to fight, right? But they're all going in with different objectives. Some are trying to stay till the end, some are trying to do something specific and extract out. And there's that ebb and flow and join in progress and like in and out sort of gameplay is really what gives the dynamic life to a session that is very different from old arena shooters. And so like contracts, quests, tasks, challenges to unlock cosmetics, like, your camos on your weapon and all of that. That is a key driver to a lot of the gameplay. It's not just about getting kills. Now, in the course of doing those things, you're probably going to get kills. But it is not always the core goal of every single player in the tower.
Yeah, totally makes sense. Yeah.
Welcome back, Quinn.
Thanks.
Well, yeah, glad to have you back. Had some technical difficulty.
Great time to happen.
Yeah.
Can we get a graphic of a variant like sweeping the floor for when this hits YouTube?
Different type of cleaner, right? Not the not the ones in the tower.
That's right.
Yeah, well, it's what video editing's for. Cool. So, Quinn, I don't know what you missed, if you were listening or we just couldn't hear you, but
oh no, I was out. I was totally gone.
You took a nap. All right, that's cool.
Yeah.
Did you know you were out, or were you still pitching?
I know. I heard you say, "Oh, we lost Quinn." I was like, "What are you talking about? I'm right here." And then everything just like powered down. So
Womp
yeah,
womp.
good times.
Right. Next question. Don't worry, I killed that answer.
I know you did.
I knew exactly what you were going to say. I was mind melded with you.
You got it, man. You covered sectors, no problem.
Yeah, yeah, easy peasy. All right, cool. So, yeah, let's talk about these roundtable discussions, right? How we're going to integrate community feedback, help people feel heard, and not just like feel heard, but actually like hear them, right? So this question comes, is there a way that we might be able to have more discussions and put them in public settings or places where they are, open for everyone to see? They're not just feedback forms that we're looking at internally, so that people can track what kind of feedback has already been submitted, so that they can track conversations. Do you guys want to talk about that? I mean, people have thrown out, like, in this question, right, a forum or a Google Doc. But do we have a way to do that? And if so, what is it?
Yes. So that is going to evolve and grow over time, right? Like right now with the snapshot and the limited things to get feedback on, that is a form, right, that asks specific questions, and then also discussions like happening in the Discord, right, which is sort of our forum. And we are actively listening and looking at all that, and like you will already see that like a lot of the stuff people have said, or a few key things that people have said since Snapshot 1 is already in the build from the hotfix that we're dropping today, right? FOV sliders. We heard that people wanted to switch, like right now for accessibility reasons, ADS, sprint, crouch is a toggle, right? So you only have to hit it once and you say ADS, or you say crouch, or you say sprinting. That is for players with movement function issues. It helps those out. But we instantly heard from people of like, oh man, I understand why it's in there as default, but I'd really like the option to switch it so that I can just hold ADS, and then as soon as I let go, I'm not ADS anymore. Same for sprint and crouch and whatever. So we've added that feature in via a hotfix today. I don't know if it's out yet, but it's dropping soon. As well as like fixing some of the core bugs that people reported as soon as Snapshot dropped, right? So those methods are helpful. But soon, especially once we introduce PvP gameplay, there's going to be a lot more stuff for people to give like very subjective, opinion-based feedback on, right? Player movement speed is one of those things. Gunplay is one of those. Like the balancing of height advantage, right? Especially once we get into a vertical play space and people are shooting down and up on each other and all that stuff. So we are looking at the best way to do that stuff. How we do it internally is through playtest, right? We playtest together as a group. We're all in there. We're all on voice comms. We're talking stuff. We have a wonderful producer who's like taking notes and making sure that we have actionable items for us to make tasks out of, but also discuss after the playtest to be like, oh, we've said a few things during this playtest, like, some of it's contradicting. Where do we want to go with it, right? That's where we look to Quinn to sort of make a call. What I think we need to figure out is the best way to do that with the 10,000 variants, right? And it's probably like stages of like doing playtests together, listening to feedback, right? Because the feedback you give when you're actively playing a thing and getting, fucked up, like when you're getting shot at and you're like, oh, man, this sucks for this reason, is very different than when you're sitting down calmly filling out a form.
Totally.
And so those emotional discussions are important. The second thing we're working on right now is tools and where do they live, right? Because we're looking at everything, right? And one of the things we're looking at is the numbers of like how many people are actually providing feedback on these things, right? Because I feel like a lot of people are playing, but they may feel like, oh, somebody else probably already said this thing that I'm thinking, so I'm not even going to say it, right? We want to make sure that we have very easy, low barrier ways for you to communicate what you're feeling and not worry about if other people are saying it, right? And so being able to display what everybody else is saying is helpful for that, because then you can literally see like, oh yeah, somebody's talking about this, so let me upvote it and support that thing that I already think. And so what we're looking at now is what is the best way to display that and where is the best place to collect that. One of the places we'll always collect feedback is in your variant profile, but we are also looking to add in areas in the build itself where you can see the key things that are added and what we're talking about and have links to where you can do this stuff. So right now I can tell you that's what we're working on, is like in build, in game areas for you to see what's being talked about and do things and link off to, as well as building tools to sort of facilitate that both in the community and out. But I think in the future, we should expect public playtests together, discussions during those playtests where we capture stuff from a production standpoint that are actionable and we can create actual tasks out of, because that's I want to align as closely to the actual game development process as possible, right? We just need to do it at a larger scale. And how we do it in game development is we play and we talk and we take notes, and then we take a break and we review those notes and we discuss those notes, and then we create tasks from those notes, right? And so it goes from being a very fun experience to a very serious work-based experience. And so we want to find a way to make sure you guys are involved in that fun stuff so that we can then take those discussions and distill them into the work stuff, which is tasks and iterations, and then push those into hot fixes and snapshots. So we're working on it. So all these suggestions that people are saying are like, oh, we should have a forum, we should have this. Very helpful, because it helps us sort of make those decisions of all right, this is where they want to have those conversations and how they want to have those conversations. Our job is to just build it. So yes, It is coming, and that will probably grow over time, right? We started with surveys, and then we'll probably introduce playtests, and then we'll introduce, the in-build functionality. So as each snapshot, just like the features of the game, this community inflow and digestion and parsing of data will also grow.
Yeah, awesome. And I mean, to your point of upvoting, the way that, we're sourcing questions even for this AMA is really easy, right? We're in Discord, people are throwing out comments, and then based on the upvotes, we can kind of see, how popular certain questions are.
Yeah, that's a really good point. This is a really good, if we did our playtest this way, right? Where we're playtesting and people are saying things in chat, and then people are actively upvoting them as we're playtesting, that will help us prioritize what we need to talk about after the playtests.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because I also sympathize with people that maybe don't, it's not part of their personality. They don't really want to type out, a lot of words, or oh, did we lose Quinn again? Okay, now
nope, he's back.
All right. Just a simple, right? Click the emoji, whatever, upvote your thing. That's a good way to do it. Okay, cool. So on to the next part of the feedback loop. People are wondering, are founders going to have the ability, or are we going to be asking questions about lore? Do we want the community to have a say in the direction that the lore goes, or vote on certain things? And the second part of this question is, and this is from Psychotic Music, they would love a guild that helps develop storylines or world building. So is that an option?
The short answer is yes, right? There's a caveat there. Just like with all the gameplay balancing and features and mechanics and stuff that we're going to be discussing, lore is one of those, right? And the caveat is, like I said earlier, we're not a story game, right? We're not going to have long cutscenes. We're not going to have we're not a single player narrative experience. We're a multiplayer only gameplay focusing. But that said, there is lore, right? Variants have lore to them. Claws have lore. The refiner states, the cleaners inside this dust trade, how refiner states came to be, the sort of lore of why certain sectors exist, right? Like the fact that there's a refinery section of the refiner state where they actually, produce this thing. It's where the synthetics made, right? The synthetic humans that represent the Sins faction. There is lore to be had. And so having the community's input on that stuff, definitely, right? Especially once we get further in development and we're starting to introduce, we're not a hero-based shooter, so we don't have characters like Apex has characters, because our players are default, and then they build out what they look like and all that based on the customization options. And so you are your character, right? But sort of as we introduce, and I'm talking far in the future, right? As we start introducing seasonal events and all that stuff, sort of having the community input and driving that is going to be key. I'll tell you, a lot of that stuff's going to happen naturally as we're all playing this game and talking about it and getting it right. Just like Spacebob's, good stuff bubbles to the top, right? As it becomes discussion worthy within the community. So yeah, the short answer is yes. But how deep we go in the narrative thing is going to be interesting to find out. Unless we get 6 months down the road and we find out that everybody in this community really wants a narrative aspect of this game, then maybe that changes entirely. Right now, I'm like, gameplay.
Right, yeah. No, for sure. But yeah, it's a good point, right? Like, in theory, nothing is off limits.
Yeah, but I would be amazed if we get down the road and people are demanding cutscenes. I'd be like, what? I did not see this coming.
Okay. All right. Well, let's move on to, since you mentioned 6 months down the road, kind of sets us up perfectly for this question. Biggest question on most people's minds, maybe debatable, but how long do you anticipate development taking for this game? 1 year, 2 years, ballpark, as long as it takes?
Yeah, the real answer is as long as it takes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We are deliberately not setting a release date for this game. We have deliberately not, we don't have a publisher for this because we don't want like publisher milestones that have a very set release date where we have to adjust, you know, everything in our development cycle to accommodate those milestone dates, right? Like what we have done is we've set a promise with our community of like, hey, we're going to be developing snapshots every 6 weeks, right? But we have the flexibility to decide when something's done or not done. And if something's at a state that it's at a point that could get feedback from people, we can put it into a snapshot. If it's not, then we'll push it to the next snapshot and other stuff will go in that snapshot. We have that freedom and flexibility, right? And so what I've been telling everybody and any investor who's talked to us or any of that stuff is this game is going to be done when the community decides it's done. Because the entire reason we built this company and this development model is because we are sick as developers and players of shipping games that we feel are not finished. Right? And like, yeah, it eventually get finished over post-release updates and stuff, but those release dates have always been driven from a business marketing standpoint, not from a development standpoint. And that's not how we're building this game. That's not how we're building this company. And not everybody can do that. I understand that, right? I'm not trying to fault developers who are sort of stuck in that model, but we built this company from the ground up to not be stuck in that model. And so I don't want to betray ourselves by setting a release date now, right? And so, but if you ask me my gut feeling, 19 months.
Oh my gosh. Get out of here.
Listen, if you ask me personally, I think in 19 months, we're going to be at a point that we all as a community are going to be like, oh, I feel like we should let more people in. Like, let the public in, right? But what I'm not saying is, I'm not going to set a release date for 19 months that we're all like crunching to meet, right? And I don't want the community to set a release date. None of us should be rushing this process. Not us, the developers, not our players, not our variants. Let's take it as fast as it needs to go, because if we get into, like, for example, when we introduce PvP gameplay, if we want to get super granular in the weeds on that and spend a lot of time figuring out that first iteration of it, then that's what we should do, right? Like, I don't want us to feel forced of like, oh, like, we got to push forward, guys. We got a schedule to keep, all of that stuff. As long as we're making meaningful progress every 6 weeks, then we're doing our jobs as a community, right? I don't want to get hung up on this, like, oh, we got to be out by this date. We got to be out by this date. But I do think it's reasonable for us all to collectively be thinking about when is the public going to be coming in, right? When are we going to get that big influx of millions of players? Because that's going to change a lot of stuff, right? Because even decisions we make as a community are going to change the moment we have 1 million people in who were not part of this community from day one, right? Because that's when you start getting in the cheaters and the exploiters and the boosters and the people who do not only have their self-interest in mind, right? And then are balancing and decision making and cheat solutions, anti-cheat is going to take higher priority at those moments than it did during development when we're all like copacetic and having fun together and not trying to grief each other, right? And so like that's going to be an interesting thing to plan for once we get there as a community.
Yeah, cool. Right on. Oh, okay. So this is actually, I really want us to talk about this because I've been in the Discord. I've seen there's definitely founders from all over the world. And, you know, for some of them, attending some of these events are also not super feasible. Do we have any plans to do a founders or DEADROP event in another part of the world outside of the US?
Yeah, we're definitely thinking of that. Absolutely. It's not just we're not just trying to be everything in, you know, in Los Angeles or you name it, city in the United States. We're looking at other places as well. So we're having internal discussions about it and conversations, things that we're excited about. And then when it comes closer to things getting a little bit more set in stone, yeah, we'll reveal those locations as they come up. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the short answer.
Yeah, cool. Right on. And then timeline wise, to be, you know, in the vein of inclusivity, right? Console players are obviously really curious to know when they can get in on these snapshots. And that's not to say, when I say that, I think what we're really talking about is like controller support too, right? Like, so are people going to be able to play the snapshots with a controller?
Yes.
Yep.
So
Yep.
yeah. So today a hot fix drops and makes sure the entire snapshot is playable with a controller. The exception being the UI menus, right? Our goal for Snapshot 2 is to have full controller support. So the second snapshot, we want to be fully playable, both the gameplay and the UI with a controller, which that would classify as full controller support. Now, in terms of console builds, that is out of our hands to a certain extent, right? And I've talked about this on Twitter and in the community a little bit, but consoles are going to come online as soon as we can get certification through the platforms. Now, you got to understand, we are sharing the earliest builds. And consoles, because they're a platform, a closed system, they have very strict certification process. You have to go through a lot of things that we aren't thinking about right now because we're focused on core gameplay mechanics. Like, what happens if you plug in two controllers and one is Bluetooth and one's not, and you pull the controller, 5 minutes after playing the game? And what happens if the player turns on the build and leaves it running for 24 hours and never shuts down the console? And like, there's all these stress tests that you have to do and things that you have to account for when you go to consoles that we don't have to worry about on PC and we're not even thinking about. So it is generally very hard to get early builds playable. We can get it playable today on consoles, but to get it approved through certification, right? So that's sort of the realistic what we're up against on platforms, and it's no fault to the platforms. Like, they need to make sure that their platform is stable. It's not the Wild West of PC where we're okay downloading super early stuff that might crash all the time because it's in development. We understand that, right? Consoles do not work that way. And so what we are doing to make sure that we can release on console as fast as possible is we are make sure that we are developing with consoles in mind all the time, from a optimization standpoint, from a controller support standpoint. We always have that in the back of our mind, and we are open to look at whatever solution we have to do to get it out as fast as possible, right? If that means because we are technically a new studio, which means not only do we have to get the build to a point that it can pass certification, but we also have to get to the studio to a point that it can pass registration stuff, right? Because, certain platforms have different requirements on who can publish to the platform, right? So we have to end up, for the console ports, working with somebody who's already a well-established PlayStation or Xbox developer publisher just for the console versions. We'll look into that if that's what helps our console players faster. But the thing is, the conversations, we're having them, we're pushing through them as fast as legal and business allows. But meanwhile, we don't want that to hold up our PC development. So we are not going to delay anything on the PC front just because console things take time.
Yeah, for sure. No, that totally makes sense. Cool. And then also in terms of more inclusivity, Quinn's like, what are you gonna say? No. Are there discussions about founders potentially becoming employees of Midnight Society in the future?
Yeah,
Already
it's
happened.
already happening. Yeah, Jinx.
Ah,
Ah!
Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
yeah.
we've got people, right? You want to
Yes.
call them out, give them some dap?
Yes, Steve Rand came from the community.
Yep.
We've had several people we met at the founders event in LA who were like, "Hey, I do this, and I would love to do it for Midnight Society." And like literally, as soon as we got back, we're like, "All right, let's start that conversation." Who are currently going through the interview process. So like, yes, if you've got like a skill and an expertise, and we have that need, and right now we have a lot of needs, especially on the animation front. Then start the conversation with us. Apply. Our process is, it could take some time. We have a very, big vetting process. But it's already happened. There's others interviewing now. I'm sure it's going to happen in the future, because the thing is, what's different about our approach is like, we specifically wanted a lot of variants who have game development experience or creative experience, right? So like those who filled out the application process to become a variant, remember, like the first question was getting to the heart of who you are. Are you just a player who's here to have fun? Great, that's fine. We need you. Are you a hardcore player who's here to seriously have fun? Great, we need you too. Are you an indie developer? You're a AAA developer? You're esports athletes? All of that, right? So our community is actually made up of all of that. A lot of people who work in the industry in many capacities. And so I would not be surprised if even more end up joining us as official Midnight Society employees in the future.
Yep.
Yeah, awesome. And yeah, like you said, already happened. Gonna happen more. Awesome.
Yeah, I love it when I see applications or people reach out to me about opportunities and they open up with their variant call sign. They're like, "Yo, I'm this Bravo Tango 2, and I'm interested in this position." I'm like, "All right, I'm listening.
Yeah.
Tell me more."
Right on. Yeah. Cool. So we are just about to wrap up. There is one question, actually for me in here. How
Ooh,
does
nice.
Yeah, spicy. No, I'm just kidding. It's a great question actually. So I'll take this last one. How does the marketing team plan to address gamers that may argue that there will be / is too much gameplay being shown before actual release of the full game? And Rob, you can also back me up on this. Like, we're along for the ride. This has never been done before, the way that we're doing things, right? The way that we're bringing the community in, really encouraging founders and variants, right? One and the same, to post their own content and to share what we're sharing with you guys. So yeah, we love it. We want you to show gameplay. We want you to share the snapshots.
Yes, 100%. And like that was like, the biggest, I think, whiplash for traditional game journalists after the LA event and the first Snapshot, right? Is like PC Gamer and Forbes, and a lot of them literally did not know how to digest and talk about this Snapshot, because they're like, people don't show games this early. They're like, there's no animations, there's none of this. And it's like, yeah, we don't have an animator yet. The game's not finished. The entire point of this process is to put out the reel so that we can have real conversations about it at a moment that it is actionable and we can do something about it. We're not trying to sell games right now, right? You can't pre-order the game. You can't buy a copy of it. You can't spend money in the game. So this isn't marketing in that sense. There's no return on investment on us getting out gameplay, right? Because normally teams wait years and they put together $1 million trailer that has no bugs in it, no visual issues, right? It's perfectly edited over months of time, and they put it out because they're trying to sell pre-orders. That is not what we're doing. We are putting it out at the earliest possible state, before animations are done, before all the visuals are polished to 100%, before everything. And that's going to be even more apparent in the second second snapshot, because in the second snapshot, we're talking about core gameplay. We don't want you distracted by the visuals.
Right.
We don't want anybody, even the players, right? Because we're talking about player flow and balancing and level design and all kinds of things that do not require visuals to sort of have discussions around. And I'm even more interested to see what the press does with that, because it's like, this is a new way of doing it. It's super early and it's super hands-on, right? And that's the big difference between traditional community management, right? And I have a lot of experience in community management with big shooter franchises. And that was all about just, it was all about building hype, again, to convert players to purchasers, right? And to make sure that retention stayed around. But what we are trying to do is we're trying to build games openly and together, and it's not about converting, right? It's not about monetization and retention. It's about quality and diversity of opinion, right? To build games in a way that haven't been done with voices that haven't been part of the process before. And that's why at the event, we said it, right? We don't care about press right now. That is why if you look at the people who came to the LA event, it was players. It's 100% players of all different backgrounds. We weren't doing exclusive press interviews. Like, we spent all night, every member of the team, standing around having one-on-one conversations with players, not doing interviews with press, because we're not at that stage yet. We're not here to sell anybody. We're here to talk about gameplay.
Yeah, and that's why we call them snapshots too, right? I mean, instead of like your traditional, there's the alpha, pre-alpha, beta, all those things. I mean, those are even just marketing terms too. Like, they're not necessarily betas. I mean, that's why these are called snapshots. They are the snapshot or a snippet portion of the project that we are making, formerly Project Moon, now DEADROP, and everyone is along for the ride. And we're building upon it. So we got Snapshot 1 out, and we're building upon it from here on out. And then you'll have Snapshot 2 and Snapshot 3. And each snapshot will get bigger and add or two. And that is the road that we're on. And that's why we're doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Well, thanks for joining, guys. For everyone that tuned in, thank you for joining. Founders, non-founders alike. This has been super exciting. I'm really happy that we got through as many questions as we did in our just over an hour. If you guys missed the beginning of this or any part of this, we will be uploading this to
Arctix's channel.
And yeah, everyone have a great day. Keep playing the snapshots, and we'll see you around.
Right.
See you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, the first ever public AMA by Midnight Society, their second ever AMA in general. This time they opened it up to the public, building off all the hype with the name release of DEADROP during the Los Angeles event. Unfortunately, Quinn lost his internet halfway through that. He did come back and he provided a lot of information. Despite that, everything went off without a hitch. A lot of information was talked about. I know that there's a lot of folks internationally still wondering about merchandise that they were not able to go because they were not able to go to the LA Founders event. Fortunately, Rob did tweet at one point something along the lines of there was a lot of merch left over. So I'm sure that they're working on a process to try and get that to founders or give them an option. That's what you can surmise based off of that tweet. The first snapshot has been out for a little while. They did release a hot fix for it. They did update some things like an FOV slider. They also gave the ability to change the toggle on the ADS time so that when you ADS, you hold it down. They had it that way for accessibility reasons, but now you can set it up so that if you just hold down ADS, it ADSs. If you let go, it goes back. Very similar to Call of Duty. There's a lot of stuff happening here. Let me know what you guys thought down in the comments below. And of course, as always, make sure you guys like and subscribe to the channel. Make sure you ring that bell so that you don't miss a video anytime I post a video on here. Or make sure you're following me on Twitter at Arctix TV. That's where you can get the most up-to-date information of anything that I'm doing or any video that I post or anything that's going on. Make sure you guys follow me on twitch.tv/Arctix. I have been kind of on a hiatus because I've been doing all this Midnight Society stuff. They did make me a sentry within their Discord, so it's essentially a Discord moderator, but I do a lot, right? I'm here for the community. I really believe in this project. I think it's going to do very well. I'm excited to see what happens next. I hope you guys enjoyed the AMA. Let me know what you thought in the comments below. I will see you in the next video. Remember, I do have a video coming out talking about pretty much what you need to know from April 1st till now, because that's when I did the last video. So thank you so much. I'll see you on the next one. Take care of each other. Stay safe. Stay frosty.